what he helped me understand was that I was resisting doing it and the reasons why I was resisting. And when I understood that, it's like anything, I guess, that's not serving you. You think, oh, okay, I realise now what's happening, and let's create a solution to avoid that so that I will take that action regardless of how I feel.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Hello and welcome back to The Successful Bookkeeper. I am so excited to have Debbie Roberts, the co-founder of Pure Bookkeeping, the author of the E-Myth Bookkeeper, with us again as our guest today. And I'm so excited because I think this topic today is extremely important to every bookkeeper out there. And it is the topic of sales and marketing. So welcome, Deb, back to the show.
Thank you, Michael. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes, and Debbie's story in episode 1, we had Deb on as our very first guest, and if you're interested in hearing Deb's story, you really want to go back and listen to that. It's a remarkable story of her growing her business from solo to 12 bookkeepers, growing a very profitable business and building a system-dependent business such that she was able to take 6 weeks off at one of the most busiest times of the year and come back to a business that was running with very few bugs. So it's a really great story, and I recommend you listen to that episode. But today's episode is going to be all about sales and marketing, and I'm sure the listeners want to know, how do you grow a bookkeeping business from a solo to right up to having 12 bookkeepers working underneath you? And that's a lot of customers and a lot of, obviously, sales and marketing to do, Deb.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And I never liked marketing, which is pretty typical for most bookkeepers. We prefer to really just getting the work done, being in the back office, if you like, preferably being undisturbed and just getting on with the job and getting bank recs because we can focus on that and concentrate. But to actually put yourself out there and market yourself, and also selling yourself doesn't feel, like you walk around and say, hey, I'm great, just let me tell you how good I am. That generally doesn't sit very comfortably with most bookkeepers, and it certainly didn't for me.
Yeah, and when you first got started, this was not a natural thing for you, and as you mentioned, it's not natural for many bookkeepers because of just the way you are and your focus on the work. So what did it look like in the beginning? Let's start there.
Well, where I started was by word of mouth referrals. I actually didn't do any marketing because I guess you'd say I did do marketing, but it didn't feel like it. I just told people that I knew that I was open for business. And I mentioned in a previous podcast that one of the first person I spoke to was a chiropractor who is a friend of mine, and he gave me my first referral, and he referred other business as well. And I spoke to the person that I worked with at the doctor's clinic. The secretary there her husband had a business, and she asked me if I would do work for him. So it didn't feel like marketing. I was just talking to friends and family and just saying, look, I've decided to start my business. I've actually got some business cards. Would you mind hanging on to these? And maybe if you can come across anyone who has a business and needs a bookkeeper, then feel free to pass on my business card. I'd be happy to have a chat with them. So I did do a little bit of marketing, but it felt very safe. It was in my comfort zone. But as I started to put on bookkeepers and then I started working with Pete, we needed to create momentum. We needed to be a bit more consistent and try other marketing strategies, because it's one thing when you're just trying to fill your own books and you do word of mouth and maybe a couple of ads or something like that. But it's another thing when you've got a team who are expecting to get enough work. So it's no point putting on a person if you don't have enough work for them. So no matter what size business that you've got, whether you are a startup practice or you're a mature business already with staff, you need to create momentum around your marketing. It just creates an easier environment to generate more work more regularly. So I started working with Pete, and he taught me a whole bunch of other marketing skills, but I often resisted what he was teaching me. So for example, I joined the networking group and needed to learn how to sell myself in 60 seconds. So you'd stand up and meet with new people and tell your message. What's a good referral for you? That was really difficult, very challenging, but one of the best experiences that I had in those early days because it stretched me out of my comfort zone. I think marketing for me was always about stretching me out of my comfort zone. I really didn't want to do it. And in fact, that was one of the challenges that Pete had, because I would resist doing it and I would just be too busy, in inverted commas, and never quite get around to it. As we were working together, one of the strategies we had was to meet with accountants. Firstly, I started off with my own clients' accountants, so my existing clients and their accountants, and to actually meet with them. But I would avoid doing it because I didn't feel comfortable. I felt a little bit, particularly in the early days, lacking confidence, and I felt quite intimidated by accountants. They can be intimidating, and I'm just a bookkeeper, and it was all that negative kind of thoughts that were going through my mind, and here I am going to present to this accountant and they know more than me, and what if I make a fool of myself? So you can imagine with these thoughts swimming around my mind why I would be reluctant to actually meet with accountants. And so each time I met up with Pete, he'd say, so how many accountants did you meet in the last month? And I go, well, really, it was busy and I haven't quite worked out what I want to say. And but when he was fabulous, I'm sure I wouldn't have overcome this hurdle and grown into enjoying marketing without his persistence. And what he helped me understand was that I was resisting doing it and the reasons why I was resisting. And when I understood that, it's like anything, I guess, that's not serving you. You think, oh, okay, I realise now what's happening, and let's create a solution to avoid that so that I will take that action regardless of how I feel.
Yeah. And well, it's, first of all, I mean, I have to say it's also unique. There's not a lot of bookkeepers that I've met along the way that have gone out and hired a coach, and you hired one of the best coaches in Peter Cook. What was it like having Peter there to actually give you some of those skill sets and to really to hold you accountable?
Oh, look, I have said from the minute I started working with him, really, that I give him all the credit. He would say something else, I'm sure, but I wouldn't have achieved the success that I achieved without his expertise, without his insight. He is such a perceptive person. I would be saying, oh, well, I don't like marketing, or I just make these absolute statements about why I'm doing something or not doing something, or I don't like talking to people, or collecting money and all those sorts of statements. And he would just ask me, he would pull me up and he'd say, why is that? It just let me understand why you feel that way. And more often than not, I wasn't even aware of what I'd said. It was just this thing that was trained in me, that my subconscious, or the words that I spoke or whatever it was, had trained me into believing something that actually wasn't the truth. And the number of epiphanies I had working with him, he would be always pulling me up. And he forever, half jokingly, would say to me, Deb, I've made it my personal mission to take you out of your comfort zone as often as I possibly can, which was always we'd always have a bit of a giggle about that, but it was absolutely true. He would say, right, Deb, you need to meet with accountants. And I go, I don't want to do that. It's so, I don't feel comfortable. And so we'd then work through that about why I don't feel comfortable. And then And then he realised that the solution was to create systems around the marketing for me, because I'll always follow a system, and obviously created my own, but that was the solution for helping me overcome that dread that I had around marketing, because he absolutely and rightly knew that I needed to do it. Whether you love it or not, you may never love it, but you need to become good at it. And the more momentum, using that word again, the more momentum you create around your marketing strategies, the more systems you create, it makes it easier. So you then do things automatically rather than thinking, oh, will I go and meet with an accountant this week? Let me think. Oh, no, I don't feel like it, or whatever. You put it in your diary, you make appointments, you ring accountants, you go and meet with them, and you create momentum, you create a system so that it takes the decision-making out of it. You've already made the decision. This is what I am doing. I am meeting with accountants. Right, okay, what system do I need to create in order for me to make sure that happens? Well, I've got to create a habit around ringing them. Who am I going to ring? Well, have I met with my existing accountants? Let's start off with them. It's creating momentum just makes life so much easier. You don't have to keep making decisions about whether you will or won't. You just do.
That's right. And there's very few successful people out there that are self-made. That's a nice buzzword, self-made, but every single successful person surrounds themselves with people who have expertise, people that are smarter than them, that can help them see through what they can't see themselves. And so I think that's really great. And I think it's a key that the listeners are going to want to get, that the power here in having a coach and having an accountability group is really to help you see what you can't see, is to show you those blind spots and then hold you accountable. I know for myself, around accountability, it's really easy to, go and do something that's more comfortable, and then the day passes and you get too many days like that in a row, and next thing you know, a year has passed.
Exactly.
And so you really, I think, as I've mentioned in earlier podcasts, it really is one of your strengths in terms of being able to see that you needed to surround yourself with somebody who could help you get there.
Yes. And I can honestly say that growing my business and having that accountability, I've learned more about myself and what I'm capable of than I could have possibly done in another lifetime doing something else. And that is it's a choice when you can choose not to face your fears and choose not to grow and choose not to learn and discover new things. But that was what I was inspired about, and what I knew that I didn't know everything. And I was always seeking, well, what else don't I know that I don't know? And having that, it's been such a blessing to me to have grown my business, have gone through the struggles and come out the other side. I am a different person to what I was 15 years ago. There's no doubt about that. And I'm proud of that. And I'm empowered by it.
Absolutely. The uncomfortableness is definitely the pathway. So let's get talking. You've revealed one of your strategies around accountants. So let's talk a little bit more about the accountants and how that started to work for you in your business.
Yes. So the system that I created was, whenever I met with a new client, so firstly you have your prospect meeting, and then you decide, yes, this is the right fit and we're going to work together. And I would bring the sign-up forms and everything with me at that prospect presentation. So I would go prepared to sign up this client. And part of the information that I gather is their accountant's details. And I always explain to the new client, I'm going to ring your accountant and just have a chat with them. Typically, I've done what I call a health check of the data file. So I know what issues, I can tell what issues there might be in the data file. And I explain to the client that I'm just going to meet with the accountant to discuss those issues and also just talk about each other's business. And they're usually pretty excited about that. Bookkeepers typically don't do that, by the way. Bookkeepers will talk to accountants all day. They don't mind emailing an accountant with a question or giving them a call or something like that. But typically, most bookkeepers don't go to the trouble of meeting with the accountant, particularly to establish the relationship. And that was one of the systems that I created. So meet with the client, get the accountant's details, ring the accountant a day or so after that meeting and introduce myself, explain I'm the bookkeeper for Joe Blogs. Love to make a time to meet with them. I've done a health check of their data file. I just have got a couple of concerns I want to talk to you about, and I'd love to find out about your target market and also to tell you a bit about my services and how else I might be able to help you. When would be a good time to meet? That's another critical question to ask, is when would be a good time to meet? If you say to them, give them all that information and you'd say, I'd love to meet with you, typically the accountants will say, I'd love to meet with you too, but it's just busy at the moment. Look, give me a call back in 3 months' time. And you've lost a marketing opportunity there. So, but if you say without pausing, when would be a good time for you, they are more likely to open up their calendar and book a time in. Even if it is a month or something down the track, they are more likely to do that than if you leave this open-ended question or leave it up to them to decide what's going to happen next.
Beautiful.
So that was one of the strategies.
Yeah, that's gold. And that is, closing the loop is so powerful in sales and having a next step. So you're essentially giving us all a sales class, Deb, in terms of every single interaction, there should be a next step. And you're absolutely right. Bookkeepers that I've worked with along the way have, when they start to realize this and they start to use the systems that you created around working with accountants, they go, before I would have never even thought of. So there may be listeners that are already working with accountants, but there's a lot that are going, you know what? Yeah, I work with accountants all day long, but never really thought of nurturing and building that relationship.
Yes. And I didn't either until I started a meeting with Pete, and he was saying this is a great source of referrals. They're getting clients every day that have got a mess with their bookkeeping. We need to have a system so that you do nurture those relationships.
Yeah. And, we've worked with a lot of accountants who have told us that they are just looking for great bookkeepers that can give them a great file so that they can do the work that's really important to them. And they find it very difficult to find those bookkeepers. So it's this very odd situation where you don't normally find this great, perfect marriage of businesses that can work together for mutually beneficial outcomes. And so there it is, right? Accountants. And I love that you've given away some of your strategies there. I think people will be using what you've told us so far, Deb. That's great.
And another strategy, I think it's worthwhile just speaking a little bit about what happens during that meeting that you have with the accountant, because I've got a couple of tips as well for listeners. I mentioned earlier that I found, particularly in the early days, because I lacked confidence, and I found accountants to be intimidating. And some of them were a bit gruff as well, a bit rude, a bit short, if you like. And when I went to the accountant meeting and I'd think, okay, I've thought about all the things I wanted to say about myself. I thought we'd just have this chat. But what I found was, because I was intimidated and a little bit overwhelmed by it all, I'd forget everything that I'd planned on saying. And it was a really ineffective meeting in terms of using it as a marketing tool. We'd have a nice chat and it'd be a get to know you, and we'd talk about the client and things like that. And I would walk away with basically nothing. As you said, I hadn't closed the sale. And I spoke to Pete about this. And what we did was we created another system around it. And I created a PowerPoint presentation. And Pete and I worked on that for months, probably close to 12 months on and off, where we created this PowerPoint presentation and selected the pages and what are we going to say on this page, and we need to present the problems and what's the solution and what service you provide and things like that. And then I would go with that PowerPoint presentation and meet with accountants and use it, basically. And then when I came out of the presentation, I'd go, it didn't feel quite comfortable, or when I said that, I just noticed something that was a bit icky. So I'd go back to Pete and say, this didn't feel comfortable when I said that. and I think it would be better in this order because of that. And so we worked on this on and off for 12 months and eventually created a PowerPoint presentation, which is actually in the Pure Bookkeeping system now. So what I recommend is that before you go to your accountant meeting, prepare for it. And for me, I felt more comfortable having something written down. They're only dot points. You might use your computer, you could flip open your laptop or an iPad and have something that will remind you about what you want to say. So there's be prepared. I think typically most bookkeepers prefer to be prepared. We don't like to be, something come left of field and set us off guard. And one of the critical things in terms of closing the sale, so that closing the sale in an accountant meeting is ideally getting a referral. So that there's two questions you need to ask at the end of the accountant presentation. And the first one is probably reasonably obvious, and that is, can you think of any other clients now who might need my services? So that's a fairly obvious one because you've just told him all about your services. You may or may not get a referral. That for me, I didn't often get a referral immediately from that, but I at least sowed the seed that that's what the expectation was. And the second question, and for me in some respects was even more important, was do you know any other accountants who are also having trouble finding good bookkeepers? Because I'd love to meet with them and tell them about the services that I offer. Those two questions, that's basically closing the sale. Accountants talk to each other all the time, and they talk to each other about the issues that they're having finding a good bookkeeper. And they're all mates and all in the same networking groups and industry associations and things like that. I try to get a name straight away from that. If not, the next thing that you need to do within a week of that meeting is to send the accountant an email just saying, reminding them of those two questions. If you think of any clients, feel free to pass on my business card or send them my phone number. And I'd love to meet with other accountants as well. So if you can think of another accountant who's having problems, then please pass on my details. So you need to follow up from the meeting as well.
Excellent. And I really love that. And, bookkeepers, I'm guessing, Deb, would be a strong suit, really, is that they are detail oriented. So,
yes.
These follow-ups and after the sale and before and the prep work and all of that, these are taking care of the really important details. And that's what people respect when they see that kind of behavior in a meeting, and when they see the professional presentation and then the follow-up. It sends signals about what they can expect if they were, to continue to work with you or to refer business to you.
Yeah. And I think one of the stories typically bookkeepers tell themselves is that they're being pushy. So if they ask those two questions at the end of the presentation, or if they follow up with a phone call or an email a week later, they feel they're being pushy, and that's not true. That's, as you just said, that's actually being professional.
You got that, Deb. That's where I want to jump in and say, okay, that's where we need to help the bookkeeper go beyond what their norm is. Because if you're not going to blow your own horn, nobody's going to. And that is universal across all industries. No one's going to just walk up and give you business just because you're there. You have to get out there. You have to put yourself out there, and you have to ask for business and put yourself out there. And that's what you're talking about, is exactly that. And it doesn't matter if it's business. It doesn't matter if it's music. It doesn't matter if it's art. That has to happen if you're going to get known and attract business to your business. Yes.
And I've got another little true story of one of our licensees, actually, that I'd like to share, because I think it's appropriate for this topic. I was talking to her about this exact thing and asking those questions, and two questions at the end. And she said, I know a lady who I know is in business, and we were actually at a barbecue together. And in the back of her mind, she was thinking, I need to ask her who's looking after her bookkeeping, or if she's coping okay with her bookkeeping. I need to ask her. But she couldn't actually bring herself to asking that question. And we spoke about that. And I talked about what's actually going on, and she's worried that the woman might behave or react badly or get angry, or she's afraid of something and all that sort of thing. And I said, that's not true. That won't happen. All you're asking is, as a professional, you're asking another person who's in business, who's looking after their bookkeeping for you. So I said, so despite how you feel, regardless of how you feel, the next time you see that woman, just ask the question. So step into that place. And she sent me an email the next day, and this is only last week. And she said, I've got some exciting news. I did what you said. I saw the woman, because the kids are at the same school, and, they hang out together in the same places. And she said, I just went up to her and I said, look, you know that I've been doing bookkeeping for a while. I just thought I'd ask you who's looking after your bookkeeping. And the woman just said, it's an absolute disaster. I cannot cope with it. I just don't know what to do. Would you be able to help me?
Wow.
And she was so excited. It was such an amazing win. I was so thrilled for her, because that little win, each time you do that and step into that place, you get a little win and you go, oh, high five. Your courage builds, your confidence builds, and then you're prepared to take a bolder step next time. So step into that place. You're being professional. You've got attention to detail. You're following through with the process. And it's nothing else. If your mind is telling you any other story, it is not true, and don't believe it.
Yeah, this is a layer cake story, Deb. We need to look at these wonderful layers of this story, because, number one, you mentioned it gives you confidence to put yourself out there, do something that makes you uncomfortable. It gives you confidence. And yeah, it won't be comfortable. And yes, you had one of the people in our community, that's the power of a community, belong to a powerful community. They reached out to you, you provided mentorship and support, and you helped them. So don't do it alone. Another layer is, think of this woman. She's a business person. She's in turmoil. She's probably sitting there at night, waking up going, what am I going to do? And maybe she's even afraid to ask for help. So you're doing the world a favor when you're going out there and giving people the gift of the work that you do. And then the last layer that occurs to me right now is, if you're a great bookkeeper, you owe it to business owners like her to toot your own horn and get out there and find them and help them. Because if you don't, you're leaving people. There's a lot of bookkeepers out there, but they're not all great, and they're not all working with business owners that need them. And there's a massive need in the marketplace. So there's all these great reasons to go out there and put yourself out there and do like this woman has done, which is made herself uncomfortable, and the outcome is extraordinary.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
So thank Deb for that story. That's fantastic.
Welcome.
So there's a lot here, and I'm thinking we're going to have to get you back on another episode to get into some more of these marketing and sales tactics. I mean, we've really only just started to talk about putting yourself out there and this whole concepts of accountants. And I know we're almost up to where we like to keep these podcasts. So can we have you back again, Deb? And
sure.
Let's get into some of these other strategies. I really, on behalf of all the listeners, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Successful Bookkeeper. For everyone, all our listeners, you can find us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. We'd love to hear what you think on iTunes. If you go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com/reviews, you'll be able to find out how to leave a review. And if you leave your information and let us know that you've given us a review, we'll shoot you over a copy free of charge, no credit card necessary, a copy of The Successful Bookkeeper. We're doing that for a limited time with the launch of this podcast community. And as well, Deb, I'm wondering, would you be okay with it if we were to give a couple of the scripts that you had talked about in this podcast, if we put that in the members section of our community? So for listeners, if they were to go and sign up for our community, you'd get access to all the free resources as well. We'll add some of those scripts that you've talked about today. Does that sound good, Deb?
That's perfect. More than happy to share.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. And I think
You're
it'll be
welcome.
really valuable. So get on over to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com, sign up for our community, get access to some really valuable resources that are going to help you be the successful bookkeeper that you've always wanted to be. So thanks again. Goodbye, and we will see you next time.
Bye for now.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.